Hello?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to LDM Radio Sports Talk, the show that talks about sports and other topics relatable to sports fans. Joining me this week again from New Jersey is Anthony Lopez.
What's going on, Alfonso? How are you?
All right, feeling good, feeling good. So we're gonna get into we're gonna start the show with a little bit of basketball. The Brooklyn Nets ended up winning the playoff series against the Boston Celtics 4-1. It was one of those series that was just a shock to nobody. Jason Tatum just did anything he could to try to prevent the Boston Celtics from going down any further. But at the end of the day, the trio of James Harden, Kevin Durant, and Kyrie Irving were just too much for the Boston Celtics team.
I mean, I couldn't agree more. It's nice that we got a New York team here that's putting in some work. Unfortunately, we can't say that about the Knicks, but the Knicks did pretty well.
Yeah, we'll get to the Knicks in a little bit. We want to go, with the brighter side of local news. And so, let me ask you. So, if you're a basketball fan in Brooklyn, and you grew up and you were always rooting for the Knicks, and then all of a sudden the Knicks are in this decades-long lull where they just haven't really been competitive, and then the bright, shiny Brooklyn Nets come to town. Do you feel like, as a sports fan yourself, if you're growing up in Brooklyn, that it was okay to make the switch from the the New York Knicks over to the Brooklyn Nets?
I mean, you would seem to think, growing up in New York, Brooklyn, you finally got a home team, like you said. Some people might say it's a front runner thing, but you're just happy that a New York team is doing it. I mean, it all depends on the person. It depends on your mentality, and it depends on how much you love basketball.
Yeah, it's a very interesting topic, and I think that when it comes to people being like the New Yorkers and the hometown, that's pretty much, I would say, the only thing that would really prevent a front runner kind of status. Especially, it's long been known that basketball is the biggest bandwagon sport in New York City. Like, it's absolutely. Well, we talk about it for weeks. There's still nobody. I still haven't seen anybody from last week that's had any kind of Cavaliers merchandise or anything. So it's just the
Let me
biggest.
ask you this, Alfonso.
Huh?
With that being said, if you are a Knicks fan now, okay, I don't know if you were talking about prior to the season or right now. You're a Knicks fan. They just lost 4-1. Do you start rooting for the? Do you start rooting for the Nets? Is that something that you're going to switch over to just because they're a New York team, or you say, no, I'm a diehard Knicks fan. I can't see another New York team win besides my Knicks?
That's an interesting topic. I really don't know. For me, I don't really have a personal hatred towards the Brooklyn Nets. I don't think it's the same as the New York Rangers and the New York Islanders. That kind of cats and dogs hatred. I know that there's a lot of fans that wouldn't agree with me on that situation. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't mind seeing the Brooklyn Nets do well, and have a New York team actually do well. I think it would be great for New York if they were able to pull off the victory. The same would go for the New York Islanders if they were able to have some success. But me personally, I'd rather have that not happen. But that's a story for a little later on. But I think it raises an interesting point of finally having a hometown team after not having a hometown team, while your team is just kind of was, like the Knicks were pretty dysfunctional there for a while. So it wasn't, it was kind of tough to hang in there. So I think overall it would just be good for the Brooklyn Nets to continue advancing. What it looks like to me right now is they have the big three, and they also have Blake Griffin, who's not, who doesn't have to be the first, second, or third option. He's pretty much, doing what he does there, and it's to the point that they have DeAndre Jordan not even playing a lot. But it's very plausible for them to be able to cut through the rest of the Eastern Conference and end up in the NBA Finals. Who they end up facing and how that matchup will be yet to be determined. But we'll get to the New York Knicks now. The New York Knicks ended up losing their first round playoff series 4-1 against the Atlanta Hawks. I think this was already a successful season for the New York Knicks. They were projected to win only 26 games, roughly from the different the polls. They were supposed to be a lottery team. They were not supposed to do well. It was maybe like 2 years ago where they started signing players by roles instead of just signing, trying to sign like the biggest. Well, I'd say swinging and missing on the biggest names, because that's usually what would happen. They would go out for the big names, and the big names would want to go elsewhere. They didn't want to just play in New York, or that in Manhattan. So they end up getting role players, and then this year with Tom Thibodeau taking over the lead role, they were able to have success. They were 41-31. They were pretty good. They went into a Hawks team where I mentioned last week that they were, kind of they both were up and comers after being losing teams for a really long time, and the Hawks were just better at being young and inexperienced and seizing the opportunity than the New York Knicks were.
You know what? Honestly, though, the Knicks are, like you said, they're not just going after that one big name. They're a well-rounded team. Are they missing a few pieces? Absolutely. Like you said, they're only supposed to win 20-some-odd games. To make it to the playoffs in the first round is absolutely phenomenal of what they've accomplished. Knicks fans, I think we have a nice, bright future to look forward to. Again, for, just aside a couple of pieces that they're missing to go a little bit deeper into the playoffs, it is what it is. And we'll touch upon it in hockey, too. It's not just about, signing that big name. It's about making a well-rounded team that everybody could pull their weight to make it to the championship.
Yeah, though, and Mike Breen said it best, where the New York fans really rallied around this team. The New York Knicks were really dysfunctional, really bad. Not a bright future. It was just really, really bad for a really long time. And us as fans, we were always just looking for the quick fix. When are the superstars going to sign? When can we get more than two? Because now it's not your lone star just coming in anymore to try to win. It's pretty much like an Amari Stoudemire when they ended up signing him a couple years ago. Well, 2010. There wasn't now superstars want to come as a package deal so that they're not the only ones and having success right away. And the New York Knicks could not get that done. But at the same time, they built the team. Julius Randle. Became a huge star over this past season. In the playoffs, he hit the wall. I think, as a 26-year-old young man in his first playoff experience, I think he still had that bit of ceiling to go. And, I think for the entire team that this is an experience that this is a loss that they've endured that is going to propel them in future years. R.J. Barrett's only 20 years old, so he has a very bright future from what we've seen during this regular season. And, depending on what parts they end up keeping and letting go, they have $50 million in cap, roughly $50 million in cap space. So you figure they got to re-sign some of their guys, but they're going to have enough to get a big superstar if they're able to corral one. And now they're attractive. Now they are a team that one superstar can go there, complement them, and take them to the next level.
Absolutely.
So what the Knicks have built is tremendous. It seems like it's overnight, but it really took, it took a really long time, but the dominoes finally fell the way they needed to for this New York Knicks roster. And in years to come, there's going to be that say the Brooklyn Nets and the New York Knicks are going to be, duking it out. But right now, the Nets are ready right now to make that move, and the New York Knicks still need a little more time.
Yep, couldn't agree more, buddy.
So, as far as the rest of the NBA goes, mostly the favored teams are winning. The 76ers are going to face the aforementioned Atlanta Hawks. And, I'm personally going for the 76ers. I don't really care if, the New York Knicks and 76ers rivalry is there. Like, right now, it's just the Atlanta Hawks just need to go. That's my opinion. That's the opinion of most, I believe. Some New York fans can't root for Philadelphia. So let me take you to, well, we're going to switch gears. We're going to switch over to hockey now. And I was having this conversation with a couple of other New York Rangers fans, and I think this is like kind of a unique situation for, like tri-state area teams. And, like in New York, we have that very unique situation where there's two teams in every sport. So, if you're like, if you and I are Yankee fans and, like we agree on the summertime, but then, when it comes to football, well, one side is Jets and one side is Giants. There's no harmony all year round, and this goes for many, many sports fans because there's two teams in each sport, so there's so many different combinations on how many favorite teams you could have if you do like all four teams. So that being said, we have the Boston rivalry and we have the New York rivalry. So Boston, New York, they go, they years and years, decades of rivalry, Babe Ruth, going to, getting traded to the Yankees for pretty much cash. And, ever since then, there was like the curse for a while. And then now, over the past 15, 20 years, Boston's making a roaring comeback in every sport where they're just taking titles left and right. And, there's a huge New York-Boston rivalry. So in the series of the Boston Bruins versus the New York Islanders, and you're a Rangers fan, I'm a Rangers fan, what team are you going for and why?
You know what? Like you said, Boston's been scooping up everything for the past, X amount of years. They've been, football, hockey, baseball. They've been getting a lot. If I'm not mistaken, the Bruins have won the Stanley Cup within the past 10 years, if I'm not mistaken.
2011.
2011. So the Islanders right now really haven't won anything since the 80s, the mid 80s. They got a team right now that, everybody was upset when John Tavares left. Me being the Rangers fan, looking at it from an outsider, I thought that was a blessing because I thought John Tavares was a little slow for the team and to the pace that they needed to play. As that being said, Barzal is absolutely amazing. They have a lot of firepower up front. Their goaltending is pretty decent, keeping them in games and winning. So I can't believe I'm saying this as a Rangers fan. I kind of do want to see the Islanders win. It's one apiece right now. This is definitely going to be a game 6, game 7. No doubt about it. And you know what? It's great. It's playoff hockey, and it's phenomenal. I'm actually looking forward to the game tonight, starting at 7:30.
All right, so we're gonna go back to the lead here. So, as a New York Rangers fan, or even a New Jersey Devils fan, but I guess more New York Rangers. I don't know, like the New York Islanders and the New Jersey Devils have this kind of like Super Friends Justice League bond where it's just for some reason they get along, and anybody who combines with the New York Rangers does not. So that was, we talked about that a couple of shows ago. It was just established that it's just one of those things. So as a New York Rangers fan, you have the Boston Bruins and you have that New York rivalry where, in my opinion, as a New York Rangers, they have 5 most hated rivals, right? So we're gonna go Islanders, Devils, and I think your number one depends on where you live. So like you live in New Jersey, so I'd imagine you have to deal with a bunch of crazy Devils fans. Am I correct?
100%.
All right, so then you would probably hate the Devils more than you hate the Islanders. Is that right?
Nah, again, I'm from Brooklyn, so I mean,
Okay.
I would even think Philly too. Philly's one of my big rivalries too. Philadelphia. So
Right. Okay, so that makes sense because New Jersey's kind of like the in-between state. So like South Jersey leans more toward the Flyers, and then North Jersey leans more toward the Devils. Kind of right.
right, exactly.
All right, so so you have the all right. So we'll go back to the Boston rivalry and the New York rivalry. So you have the Boston Bruins. Like New York hates Boston, and but when we look at our the most hated teams is New York, the Islanders, Devils, Capitals because of the playoff run-ins that they've had, the Philadelphia Flyers because of what you mentioned, and the Pittsburgh Penguins because of the many playoff series that they've had, within the last 10 years. So I'd say there's 5 teams at least, without even thinking hard about it, that are ahead of their Boston Bruins as far as like the Rangers hated teams chart.
So
So
I would switch that. I would take Washington out and put Boston.
really, why?
Because you know what, we always do well towards the Caps in in the playoffs, and I think they might have beaten us once, but if you look at the total, we've beaten them more times and knocked them out of the playoffs more times. So I'm really going to lean towards the original 6 matchup, Rangers and Boston, as a rivalry for me. Absolutely, all day.
Interesting, because in my perspective, I'm thinking the Rangers Bruins rivalry was like if you're a 50-year-old, 60-year-old fan and remembers these like past run-ins where they were going at it all the time. The last playoff series that the Rangers and Bruins had between each other before, I think it was somewhere in the 70s, they ended up going for the Stanley Cup in a weird, the weird brackets where it was like, it wasn't really like East versus West. So, in whatever way they ended up facing off in the playoffs, they faced off in the Stanley Cup, and the Bruins ended up beating the Rangers. This is somewhere in like the early 70s. So then with fast forward, they had a playoff series in 2013, and the Bruins ended up beating the Rangers in the first round. Now, this is one series that they've had in, let's say, the past 30 years. And then when it comes to the Washington Capitals, I mean, they faced the Washington Capitals, I want to roughly say 6-7 times, like in the playoffs within the last 15 years or so. And I think that's a lot. It almost got to the point where they were facing each other like every single year.
Every year it felt like.
So,
but I don't know, there's something about it. Like if you just look at the Rangers logo and the Boston Bruins logo for a matchup tonight, it's just something about the two logos together that does it for me.
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting perspective, and I think that in talking to different Rangers fans, I've surprised of what I'm hearing, but it's just it's all a matter of perspective, and the beautiful thing about being a fan of different sports is the different opinions. Sometimes you agree with them, sometimes you don't, but everybody has an opinion, and it's all about fun.
That's right.
So me personally, I'm going for the Boston Bruins just because. The New York Islanders, I mean, I don't care about the whole Boston-New York rivalry at that point. It's just any team who's going up against the New York Islanders, I want them to win. Now, if let's say if the New York Islanders end up winning the Stanley Cup, I've been on record as saying that would be good for New York, especially hockey in New York, where hockey is not the most popular sport in New York. So it would success is what always grows the brand, and that would definitely make more if we have eventually. 2 competitive teams, but right now at this current state, we have 1 competitive team doing well. It would be, I would find comfort in the fact that it would help hockey in New York, so I wouldn't be like losing sleep over it like some of our other New York Rangers fan brethren. But I think it's an interesting topic. To see who's really going for who. Like, is the Boston-New York rivalry so strong that you would want the Islanders to win? Or is the hatred of New York Islanders, New York Rangers that goes back, since the early 80s? And that's like a real, like, door-to-door rivalry that you really face every year. And, like, no matter what the records were, every time the teams faced each other, it was just, it was a near bloodbath.
I mean, it all depends on the, the person. Can you look past it? It's a New York team, winning the cup or, going for the cup while your team's out. I'm looking at it as, young players that are developing well together, that are very, very hungry. And I'm kind of putting that all aside, the rivalries. And I kind of just want to see certain players win because I think they deserve it. And the way that they're playing and the way that they're coming out every night and putting up points and making players around them better. I think it's a great accomplishment if somebody could win a Stanley Cup, and I do think that is the hardest trophy in sports to win. But again, that's my opinion.
Yeah, that actually raises an interesting topic because I've heard that argument before that the Stanley Cup is the hardest to win. I think with the mathematics of it, you have the the NHL and the NBA are exactly parallel with how they handle it. They have I think one has 30 teams and the other one has 32 teams, so there's not there's a little bit of a different percentage there, but you have 16 teams going to the playoffs. Then you have the 1 versus 8, 2 versus 7. The playoff series goes down and they reseed after every round. Well, for the most part, sometimes hockey, does these, weird years where they just have these different structures. But for the most part, you have, your weaker teams facing your better teams up until, but eventually all of that cancels itself out and the other teams face each other. And, it's 4 rounds of playoffs to decide your winner. I think it's kind of a wash. When you to compare different sports is very tough. Some sports are harder than others. In different areas, but then stronger in other areas. So I wouldn't be one to compare. Saying that basketball is harder than hockey, but at the same time, in their set playoffs, they're exactly the same. 7-game series, best of 7, moves on to the next round. It's I think those two are exactly the same if you take out all the gray area of playing the sport itself.
Well, that's where we're going to agree to disagree on that because, I mean, I just feel like hockey puts more of a toll on your body. I mean, these players are, they're playing 7 games and then they're getting one day off and hopping into another one, and you know, they're structured the same, but it's just the amount that it takes on your body each game. I mean, you play hockey yourself. I played
Yep.
hockey and basketball, and I mean, running up and down the court for a minute and a half and getting on the ice and lacing up a pair of skates and skating for a minute and a half are two totally different things. So we could agree to disagree on that, but I do agree with you that it is the same structure. Yes.
So yeah, then I think everybody to argue the basketball point. I'm not again I'm not really taking sides and I really don't try to get into the logistics of it just because everything's different. You have you know the amount of jumping up and down that you're doing on like a hardwood floor that has absolutely no give to it. It puts a lot on a lot of strain on the legs and the knees, and I think that's why a lot of the big men, especially nowadays, back in the days, like big men, I think they were, a little more built and equipped for um, the long haul. But now, you see you got a lot of guys like Joel Embiid from the Philadelphia 76ers. He's always in and out of the lineup, and it's tough. And then you have like guys like Greg Oden who weren't even really ready to take off in their careers because of injuries, and a lot of big men that they have like these leg injuries from the jumping up and down, and like they're doing it from day in and day out from years even before they end up like getting to college, and then they in the college they're doing it, and then they get to the pros, and it's just all the jumping up and down. It takes a toll on the knees and such. So I think every sport has their own little nuances and things that make it difficult. But then with the playoff structure itself, and then if you look at football, it has like its playoff structure. Now it seems like they're leaning more towards. I think they're getting closer to the 8-team playoff. I'm not sure if they're gonna keep it the same way they did last year, which I think was a beautiful system where they only had one team that went on the bye, and they added the extra playoff team, so it was it's like 7 playoff teams on each side. That was great. But then, you have this one game and you have this one day, and no matter what's going on in your life, no matter what is going on, like you cannot afford to have a bad day. And I think that is what separates like a 1-game playoff series to a 7-game series. Like the 7-game series, sometimes like, the team comes out flat in game 1 and they can make up for it, the rest of the series. But when it comes to a 1-game playoff, like that is your one day to prove that you are the better team. And that I think there's sometimes in football where the better team doesn't win that particular day, but that's why the game is played, and that's the end result is what ends up happening.
Yep. Yep. I'm
So
I'm not I'm not really a big fan of that. I do like the series rather than just the one game because, like you said, the better team might lose that day, but if you played 5 times or if you had best out of 7, um, the better team is probably going to come on top. But
yeah.
with that being said, it's the way football does it, and it's been like that for a lot of years.
Yeah, it's just I think there's when it comes, I think football would mathematically with the amount of teams that are in the playoffs and the amount of chances that you have and chances you have to redeem yourself if you don't really do well in one particular day. I think that would be the hardest one to get from all the others because of the different, the series and different things like that. So like, does it make it easier because they only play once and instead of multiple times against the same opponent? I don't know. That's a different argument for a different day. But I think that having that one day to really make it happen is what separates the great players from the good players, and like what makes it harder get to get to the end.
Yep.
All right, so we'll move on. We had a interesting situation actually happened last night where Mark Winnipeg Jets forward Mark Scheifele ended up absolutely destroying forward from the Montreal Canadiens. It was Evans, or what was it, Mark Evans, or
It was Evans. Yeah.
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 Did you see the hit? What was your take on it? And it's a very fluid situation. That still when we got on the air, I didn't see a ruling on it as of yet. What
There
was
was.
your take on it? What happened?
I mean, honestly, I was watching the game last night. I saw a lot of things today where people were saying, "Oh, he should have just took the puck and went to the corner, killed time." There was 53 seconds left, and when you're playing against a team like Winnipeg that can score within 20 seconds, you need to get that extra. You need to get that go-ahead goal. You need to get that insurance goal. So I completely understand why he went to go put it into the net. Um, but if you look at the replay, Shifley stopped skating at the top of the circles. Not once did Evans look up. He was so hungry about putting it in the net. If you look at the point of contact, his shoulder and everything is down low in his chest. When he was putting the puck in, he did lower his body. Was it a bad hit? No, it was a clean hit. But should he have maybe tried to get out of the way because, the puck was already in the net prior to the hit? Probably. But the hit actually itself was clean. It was leading up to the hit was a little questionable. Meaning, like I said, he could have maybe not hit him. It went in the net. He could have just grabbed him and whatever the case may be. But again, we're talking playoff hockey. Everybody wants that win. And yeah, let's be honest. Let's call a spade a spade. You got to lift your head up. You're playing NHL hockey. This is hockey 101. You cannot skate and think no one's going to hit you. And that's the way the league is going. And it frustrates me because are we actually going to take out the hitting in the game and just make it a finesse game, or are there going to be hits? Shifley's not a repeat offender, so do I think he's going to get a game? I don't think he should get a game. Like I said, he stopped skating at the top of the circles. He lowered his shoulder at the point of impact. His head was not. You could see it. They showed it frame by frame. I don't think he should be suspended. I think he's definitely going to have to drop the mitts with somebody, Shea Weber or somebody, on Montreal is definitely going to take it into their own hands. But again, this is another instance of, are we going to leave hitting in the game or are we not? Prime example, kids, keep your head up when you're playing hockey. He could have avoided that hit if he just lifted his head up. The entire way going behind the net, he did not look. He just looked at the puck and wanted to put the puck in the net. So, I mean, it can go either way, honestly.
Yeah, so that is what the hockey world's waiting for at this point. But I'm gonna agree with you as far as it not being super dirty. I think it was just, Mark Scheifele's got length and he's got weight on him. So and then it was just the point of contact. He just hit the guy in a vulnerable spot. So he just totally propelled in the air and like really landed awful. I mean, it just like it was an awful hit. But when you break it down the way you did, it really it makes total sense, and I agree with you on that one. Was it
I think he definitely
avoidable?
should have avoided the hit, though. Once seeing the puck was in the net, at that point, there's nothing a hit's going to do besides cause chaos. But again, I guess
Which it
when you got
definitely
that
did.
motivation and you're going forward, it's kind of hard not to not to hit somebody. I guess.
Yeah, I think and then these we're talking about seconds, and I think it's easy for a lot of the armchair people watching the games and saying, oh, he could have just held up and stuff like that. Like these are nanoseconds that players have to make these decisions, and I think like did he if Mark Scheifele thought, oh yeah, I'm just gonna destroy this guy, he's gonna like propel in the air and then he's just going to land awkwardly on the ice, which definitely made it worse. I'm gonna venture to say that it definitely made it worse with the actual landing of how the player ended up falling. If you would have went through all of that, then maybe he ends up holding up. But these are bang bang decisions in like nanoseconds, and I think that's a tough aspect that a lot of people don't really understand. Like we take for granted that they're athletes and they're professionals and things like that. But I mean, bang, like nanoseconds. It's just
It's quick.
some
Blink of it.
decisions. Yeah, some decisions can't be made. And all of that in that short time span.
Maybe not lower your shoulder, but obviously, like I said, the goal was already, the puck was already in the net when he hit him. So maybe throw your hands up, try and break the hit somehow, hit him. Try not to demolish him, but again, like you said, you have seconds to figure this out, and unfortunately he got hit. I heard he tweeted last night that he was okay. What I think is going to help Scheifele is if he comes back and he does start playing in game two. If Evans comes back in game two, it would definitely help the situation. But if he's going to be out for 3-4 games, maybe possibly miss the entire series, that's definitely going to hurt the outcome for Scheifele.
Yeah, and we'll see. I think the biggest I think benchmark when it comes to these DOPS situations is the Tom Wilson situation. It just always seems to come up with every situation when there was Ryan Reeves who ended up going haywire against the Colorado Avalanche in Game 1 earlier in the weekend. And he ends up just getting 2 games, and Tom Wilson's gets brought up and things like that. I think it's a comparison to the how many games depending on in the game situation. It's kind of
there needs to be some kind of structure that they follow. You know what I mean? They can't just look at each thing and say, okay, well, you know what, that was a bad hit, so I'm going to make that 3 games. They need to, if you're a repeat offender, you get X amount of games. This is regardless of who you are, how bad the hit was. If it's a dirty hit, this is the way they need to go. They can't. That's why everyone keeps bringing up Tom Wilson and Reeves and back at with Carcelo and all those guys back in the day with all those crazy hits. You have to be consistent with the calls, and I feel like they're not. Like when you look at the everything that's going on, if you're a repeat offender, you have to be. It has to be done. Scheifele is not a repeat offender. This has never happened before, so I would be okay with him not getting anything. Maybe a fine, which I think
it's
a league
actually.
minimum. I think the league maximum, I believe, is 5,000 for your first offense.
I'd say from following Mark Scheifele for the past couple years, I didn't even really think he had it in him, to really lay somebody out like that. But he definitely he just absolutely destroyed Evans. It was just awful.
Yeah.
So if you haven't seen the hit, just YouTube it. It's definitely worth a look. And, this is it. I think it's gonna change the series. Montreal ends up taking Game 1 after the Maple Leafs choked away Game 7. So when we were on the show last week, the it was somewhere. Toronto Maple Leafs were somewhere around closing out the series, and then
It
they
was
ended up
3-1. It was 3-1, I
yeah
believe. They
three
were
to
up
one.
3-1.
So and then they ended up losing the series. What was your take on the Toronto Maple Leafs? For everybody at home who doesn't really follow hockey, the Toronto Maple Leafs were heavily favored not only to win this series but to go on to win the Stanley Cup. They have all these experienced players that they brought on, kind of like the Karl Malone to the Lakers kind of scenarios where you had your Joe Thornton, your Wayne Simmons, your Jason Spezza, a lot of different low budgeted veterans, veteran presence to add on to the team, and they ended up losing 3 straight games to a red hot Carey Price, and they lost to the Montreal Canadiens 4-3. What was your take on what happened with the Toronto Maple Leafs?
Honestly, like I said last week, I thought they were going to run away with it, but your top paying guys are not coming through. Really, in a nutshell. I mean, I think they each had a goal. Matthews had a goal in the series, and Mitch Marner had a goal in the series. I mean, this goes back to, like we said with the Knicks, you can't, one or two superstars are not going to win you, a championship. It's a team sport. Everybody in Montreal, they were rolling. Carey Price, again, and I said it last week too, if you want to win a Stanley Cup, you need the goaltending. If you got shaky goaltending, I don't care who you have up front, you're letting 30 shots, see the goaltender, at least 3 or 4 are going to go in. So with that being said, you can't have a team. Well, I mean, the 3 players combined have more than half the salaries cap on them. And it just goes to show, when you look at all the other teams, Ovechkin's out with his guys. You have Crosby out with his guys. You have all these big name players that that hold a significant amount of cap space on the team that are not in the playoffs. They didn't make it past the first round. So I think it's great for Montreal. Carey Price is, oh my God, Carey Price. The guy comes and stands on his head. The goaltending, I really honestly think that Winnipeg is going to have some trouble. This is another series that's going to go, towards the 7th game, and if Carey Price stays healthy, for sure. But it's a shame what happened with Toronto. But I am happy for one thing, being a Rangers fan, we did pass the torch off for the longest drought to the Toronto Maple Leafs. So I'm pretty happy about that, actually.
Yeah, actually, there was some talk. I'm not sure if it's official because there was the 1 year, 2004, where there was no hockey played.
Out, yeah.
So I think that kind of messes with the mathematics, but yeah, it's pretty much they're pretty much there at this point, and that's something that the original 6 teams are gonna have the disadvantage there because they've been around for so long.
Now the question too is now, Alfonso, what do they do? Because now I believe Mitch Marner he's going to be a UFA, I think, in 2024 season. Is this something that they're going to hang on to, or they're going to see if they can maybe move one of those top pieces and get somebody else? What is it that they're going to do? Are they just going to stick with what they got and say a prayer and hopefully they make it past the first round next year? I mean, there's a whole bunch that they can do, and it's just quite interesting to see. They're going to hold him until, how old is Mitch Marner? I mean, he's got to be, what is he, 26?
Yeah,
25?
he's got to be somewhere around 24 to 26 range. I'd say it's a very tough situation. I'm a firm believer of the young, inexperienced people gaining experience and being better eventually. Now I think this was the 7th game or the 8th game that they ended up losing, where they had a chance to close out a series and could not. They, as a team, they haven't won a playoff series since 2004, and they've racked up regular season wins and points, and they've been, perennial favorites to do well, but also, with that whole choke factor, and then they're succumbing to the choke factors now. So it's a very tough situation. I think at this point, with how tight the salary cap is, you have to make some trades to try to get value back. But then you look at it though, there's not very many teams that actually have cap space. It's not like there's maybe 2 or 3 teams that could take on a $10 million contract while also giving back assets. But there's going to be no ideal situation. So, we're talking maybe a Detroit Red Wings or Ottawa Senators, like these kind of like lower level teams. And
Right.
that's for their front office to figure out. But it might be a situation where Marner might block a trade because he doesn't want to go to a destination. So it's definitely an ugly situation. The worst case scenario of them not being able to advance to the next round, or just advance in general, was awful. And then they ended up losing John Tavares in Game 1 to that gruesome injury, the accidental knee from Corey Perry. But that should, they still, talent wise, they should have had enough to overcome. But there was a very hot Carey Price, and Carey Price is the only one. So like out of the top, it's funny that you mentioned the top players. So out of the top 17 players, Carey Price, which is somewhere around 10, is the only player that is advanced past the first round. Every
Yep.
other one either just did not qualify or was out in the first round, which is amazing. And the Ted Lindsay Award, they announced the nominees, which is Austin Matthews, Sidney Crosby, and Alexander Ovechkin, and all those guys are out. Oh no, sorry, Connor McDavid, not Ovechkin.
Yep.
But all those guys are not even past the first round. It's pretty crazy.
Well, it's going to be good too because let me tell you something. They have a lot of players that they have to sign. Wade Simmons, Nick Foligno, Galchenyuk, Spezza, Thornton, Bogosian. They're all UFAs after the season, so it's going to be it's going to be an interesting off season to see what goes on for all the teams in the league at that point. They got a nice picking coming up, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, it definitely has to be a shakeup. I think anytime young talent gets thrown around, the New York Rangers are going to have their name in there because they have the assets with having the first round pick and then the second round pick the year before that. They're very loaded on the back end with young talent, which I think the New York Rangers, they ended up doing the smart thing by loading up on young defensemen, young puck moving defensemen, which are very valuable in a trade market. And I think they're going to be wheeling and dealing, and we could see. It's very plausible to see a Mitch Marner end up going from Toronto to New York. That would be something else if that was able to happen. The Rangers actually have $12 million in cap space coming back to them. That was dead money from all the buyouts that they had for years and years, for your Henrik Lundqvist, your Dan Girardis, and such like that. So, I think that would be. I think the Rangers are going to be in a running for one of these superstars, whether it be like a Jack Eichel or a Mitch Marner or some big ticket guy is going to end up coming to New York, because if James Dolan's going to release John Davidson and Jeff Gordon, who put in all this work to get the team, especially Gordon, to get them into this situation, if he hasn't been patient enough to wait a couple of more years after letting Glenn Sather mess up the team, rebuild it, and then mess up the team, and then rebuild it over 15 years before that, I could see a big trade happening to jolt the lineup and to create the jive in New York.
So let me ask you this question, going back to the New York Rangers. So Mitch Marner would probably hold about a $12 million contract. Like you said, the Rangers can handle that. Would you at that point rather sign him at $12 million, right? Or would you rather get two players at six and a half, averaging about 60 points apiece? Because I think I would rather take that.
Yeah, I think what I would do, and we're getting into a situation here where I'm going to bring up the one of the ideals that I heard from George Steinbrenner, being a Yankee fan all these years. So George Steinbrenner always hated the New York Mets because he was saying that if the Mets do better than the Yankees, that they're going to lose, that the Yankees are going to lose fans, and he wanted the New York Yankees to be the top team in New York, for many different reasons, as far as winning the title, but he wanted to keep the casual fans over on the Yankee side and have as many fans as possible on the New York Yankees side. And if there's one thing that 2015 taught me, was that when the New York Mets made their run all the way to the World Series and eventually ended up losing to the Kansas City Royals, I saw a tremendous amount of Mets hats all over the place, and like they were a hard-working, hard hat team. Much like what the New York Knicks have, what we were talking about earlier in the show. So they were able to sway the casual fans, and there were a lot of people who just didn't even like baseball that kind of got into baseball. Not exactly sure how all the updates are on that, but for that particular season, there were a ton of New York Mets hats and New York Mets talk throughout all that season. So, you know, the better team is going to be the the stronger team moving forward, and like they're going to have all the fans together. So that being said, James Dolan, if the Brooklyn Nets end up winning the championship or having a long string of success, making them the top team in New York, that's going to cause knee-jerk reactions for the New York Knicks, and they're spending all that 50 million. Whether they do it wisely or not, they're going to make some pop to try to like get the eyes back on the New York Knicks. And it's going to be the same thing for the Rangers. If the New York Islanders end up making a long push to the playoffs and eventually end up winning, they're going to have all the limelight. They're going to have all the casual fans, and they're going to have all the jive. So the New York Rangers are going to make these moves to try to propel them forward, whether they're rational or not. Like I don't think the detailed plans are out. I think they're out the window at this point. I think that um, the New York Knicks and the New York Rangers are going to be run by whatever their you know cross city rivals do, and if they have that long success, it's going to make the MSG side make these knee jerk reactions, and they're going to get top superstars, top talent, whether they have to give up too much or not, just to make sure they're in the building and to move forward. I could
Well,
totally see that
I,
happening.
yeah, I agree with you to an extent. I definitely don't see them losing fans, like you said. It's different for basketball. The Knicks versus the Brooklyn Nets. But when you go into I feel like hockey's a more rival. You wouldn't root for this team, or you won't switch, whatever the case may be. Who's winning? You'll just make you hate them more, pretty much in a nutshell. But I do agree with you that they're going to make some knee jerk reactions. That if the Islanders do win, are we just going to start signing people that $10 million, 33 years old, a win now, that's the last chance to win, but they can help us? Or, like I said, me personally, I'll sign two guys that are at $6 million, giving me 60 points, what could possibly give me 75 at the end of the season. I mean, that's why we're not GMs, Alfonso. I mean, honestly,
Absolutely,
there's a
absolutely.
lot that we don't know, but it's going to be interesting to see. I mean, we finally have some money that we can play with. It's just the fact on how we're going to spend it and who we're going to give it to.
And I think to add on to your point, I think there's different tiers of fans. So you have your hardcore fans. Your hardcore fans, they're gonna spend the money. Like that's pretty much your lock, your bread and butter. Those are gonna follow the team wherever it is. So it's the next tier where you have the casual fans, like the ones who I only follow when they're in the playoffs. Like those fans. That's the biggest market when it goes from which New York team is the most successful, and those are the ones that are swayable. So you're gonna have people who, yeah, I like the Rangers in 2014, but then I stopped watching hockey for a little while, and now, oh, the Islanders are doing really well, so I'm gonna start rooting for the Islanders and get back into hockey and things like that. These are very plausible stories. This is not for you and I or different hardcore fans like that. This is for like there is a casual fan market, and that's where the big money's made, from like the bottom line standpoint as the New York teams as a business. And then you have your new fans who get into the game from the jive and the success and like the hearsay that's going on in the rest of the city, which is what we saw hugely between 2014 and 2016, where the Rangers were making well, it's maybe 2012 to 2016, where the Rangers were making their deep runs, and a lot of people were back in the New York Rangers, and then it kind of sustained itself through their 5-year playoff drought at this point. But now the New York Islanders are doing their thing, so you're gonna have people, oh yeah, what's hockey? And then, oh, well, the New York Islanders are doing really well. Let me start following them, and then they're it's going to snowball from there. So it's just different scenarios for different levels of fans. But at the end of the day, success is what brings the casual fans, what sways them over, and what brings the new fans that weren't fans before. And this is all generating more money income toward the bottom line. And when it comes to businessmen, obviously James Dolan wants the biggest teams and the biggest market in New York. So, New York fans want, like us, they want those teams to do well. But there's the other side, the other owners and stuff like that. They want to do the best. So, it's a tug of war, basically.
Well, I mean, I do agree with you on that. You're definitely right at the different tiers, but like you said, we want to see results as a New York fan. I feel like we've suffered enough with these droughts, and I'm kind of done with it.
Yeah,
I'm sure I can speak for you as well.
yeah, absolutely.
But again, let's see. I mean, let's see what Dolan's got in store for us. I mean, after this past season, firing JD and our GM, head coach, I mean, he kind of cleaned house. So we have no idea what's in store for us next season. Obviously, he's got an agenda that he's following, and Chris Drury, let's put some faith in him and let's see what happens.
Yeah, no, I think in the where we are right now. So, like, let's just say, as sports fans, New York sports fans in general, the New York Islanders and the Brooklyn Nets, who are the two teams left in these races, if they end up doing well and having success, and one of them ends up winning the title, that would be good for New York. Bottom line, depending on what side of the fence you are with different teams, overall, it's just better for New York if it ends up happening. Especially since if you look at it, the mathematics is, every other place in the country, aside from a couple of, like the Chicago has two baseball teams. Depending on what your alliance is in LA, there's a couple of different two teams in each sport kind of thing. But New York has two teams in each sport, and they still aren't able to bring home championships. It's basically like they double their chances over everybody else. You have your Boston where there's one team in every sport, and then they end up winning a bunch, and you have your different places here and there. And there's absolutely no winning happening in New York, even though they have double the chances having two sports teams. So it's just I think that's the biggest frustration of like New York versus everybody else. Like something where like maybe like the mayor or the governor, like those kind of people who would love the generation, revenue, generating of revenue to come to the city, that just has not happened.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's kind of strange that you brought that up because we are the only city that has multiple teams like that in pretty much all sports. Could it be a money thing? Like if we were just one team, do you think we would generate more money, more revenue? I don't know. I mean, I've never actually thought of it like that, Alfonso. It's pretty strange that you brought that up because, it's baffling. I wonder if there's a reason behind that.
Yeah, and it's I think New York, population wise, there's enough to sustain too. But it's the unique situation that we have here that no other place really has. Like if let's say if you live in Detroit, you just love like your Detroit teams. You got one team in every sport, and you're good to go. So different parts of the country, they all have these different things. Like if you're from Pittsburgh, you like the Pirates, you like the Steelers, and you like the Pittsburgh Penguins, and that's it. There's no other competitions, kind of things like that. And Philadelphia, same thing. Philadelphia has their teams, and it goes on and on like that. But then you have the New York, who has these different teams, but they have double the chances to bring championships home, and they have not been able to accomplish that. And
sometimes maybe that hurts us. Maybe we have too many. We need to focus on one team per sport. You know what I mean? Maybe we can, I don't know, manage better, or I don't know at this point. I'm just a frustrated New York fan.
yeah, absolutely. It's just it kind of defies logic when you put it to the mathematicals, and you put in the possibilities and things like that, and how everything else can turn out. New York should definitely be more successful than it is, and then it kind of makes it like a running joke to the other teams, to the other cities that have championships and recent success and things like that. And it's just like, damn, like New York has all these teams and just can't win jack.
Well said, Alfonso. Well said.
All right, so we're gonna wrap up our show for this week. Thank you very much, Anthony Lopez, for stopping by again.
Awesome. Love it, guys. Thank you.
All right. My name is Alfonso Caldero. We'll be back soon. LDM Radio Sports Talk.
Woo!